Penelope and I have known each other for many, many years, but we really started collaborating on this idea about 10 years ago, where Penelope she said, people with money have too much power and they distort the conversation, and we get bad outcomes over and over again. Why do we keep doing that? And she said, well, let's write an essay about that. And then we started writing it. We were having trouble writing it. And at some point, Penelope said, well, maybe we can make a movie. And I said, Penelope, this is the Federal Reserve. We don't make movies, but she wrote a screenplay, and I commented on the screenplay, and it really touches on a lot of those themes that David's book addressed as well. And so I think that's really important. And I think what I'd like, Penelope, in the few minutes we have, is to kind of focus our comments on just sort of two ideas or two sets of issues. One is around this idea of, you brought up in an event we did last year when we were back in the bank at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. You were on stage and you made the comment that artists are the early stage investors, the angel investors for neighborhoods. And I've heard that's been bouncing around in my head through this entire conversation, because whether it's embrace the fuzzy, change the power dynamic, get rowdy, change the world. So many of those themes by David, Atue, and Daryl really were brought to bear on that. So I wonder if you could talk about that. And then maybe we could shift to Annie's question about, how do you lever this up? What are the tools to make this bigger and make it the commonplace approach to investing? So Penelope, over to you.
Wow, I mean, of course, we'd love to keep this going for another hour or so, but David, to your question, I think we saw the confirmation today of how artists are early stage investors in their communities, from Daryl, from David, from Hatui. Artists focus on culture, and culture is the root system that informs the strength of the customs and institutions and practices of our society. So it is the starting place for community investment. And if ever we understood how to take artists seriously, we've heard it today in several examples, not only of artists as early stage investors, but if you listen to someone like Daryl, a beautiful example of someone who is not just early stage investor, but now in fact sits in every place in investment in his community.
My mute button. You think I'd get the hang of this by this point? And Penelope, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about that sort of idea of what the levers are. And I feel like, I think Liz got us started in that conversation earlier around it's really education and consciousness raising. The examples are out there, the data are out there, the literature reviews are out there. That's clearly a key component. And then we also heard about a lot of really super impressive pilots, whether it was Deborah's discussion about the post office in Alaska or the work that's being done with the Baltimore schools. We've got lots of pilots that are working. And of course, Daryl had a number of these examples that were so powerful. What other levers do we have? What are the other levers we need to be pushing on?
Well, I'm going to focus on just one because of the limited time we have, which is for the comprehensive kind of system that we need to create for investment in artists. My view is that we really need to continue to focus on the rigor that we need to apply in practice for artists to be able to actually gather the evidence of the impact they are creating on the health and well-being of their communities. So, for example, the work that's going on among Susan, David, and their collaborators at Johns Hopkins, and the work at the University of Florida School of Arts and Medicine, where in fact we just held a roundtable, and we are committing ourselves to moving forward not solely with research on outcomes-based methodologies, but to create these kinds of tools that we can bring to artists in practice, in service of their communities, so they can gather the actual evidence of the impact they have on community health and well-being. That will be transformational for us, and we need to move that work forward.
Penelope, that's so amazing you ended us on that. I often think if I ever could make money, what I would do is I would find a place that had somebody who owned all the downstream medical care cost risks for a geography, and then I would hire an army of artists to go into that geography and find ways to kind of improve the upstream social determinants of health. I mean, that I think is just and the fact that Johns Hopkins and University of Florida and others are collecting the data on that is so powerful. So thank you for that. I'm going to just a few closing remarks, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Penelope, for the last word. One is just I just want to thank all of the speakers from the webinar today. You were fantastic. I want to thank Yerba Buena Center for the Arts for their collaboration in this event, and in particular, I'd like to thank on our staff Edison Reyes and Kelly Jackson for working with Penelope on this webinar. It was so excellent. Just a reminder, the recording of this event will be available on the New York Fed webpage in the coming weeks. Please stay engaged with the New York Fed, sign up for our in-review newsletter, follow us on social media, and be on the lookout for upcoming research and events. And thank you all for attending this important discussion. Stay safe, have a happy Thanksgiving, and over to you, Penelope.
I'm breathless. And I too need to offer my thanks to the New York Federal Reserve and my colleagues there for allowing this scholarship and residency, and for the work that we've been able to do and housed at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. I think my closing remark and call to action really stems from something that David Fakunle said, which is he and Susan were talking about the fact that science is finally catching up with art. And my view is that investment also needs to catch up with art. And so we really need to take seriously this idea of investment in artists. And we need to understand that artists themselves are the artists are committed to processes. They aren't simply committed to what we think of as projects or pieces of art. You've heard several examples today of the deep commitment to process in communities long harmed by these artists. So if we're going to, as another one of our colleagues today said, reverse the systems that have oppressed us in these long harmed communities, we need to understand that taking seriously our artists means investing in their ability to make the decisions themselves about the best investments in our communities. And my call to action to all of us is to find our particular way of really making decisions ourselves about using every form of investment we can to transfer and shift the power of decision-making about investment into the hands of more artists in more communities, because then we will see the kind of impact on community health and well-being that is vital to all of our collective human kindness and health and well-being. And with that, I'll say thank you to everyone who participated with us today, and my deep regard to everyone who spoke today. And please, everyone, please be safe and take care and have a happy holiday. Thank you so much for being with us today.